All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to our Webinar Wednesday series. We are so happy that you have joined us today. We're going to be talking today about taking action on financial well-being in times of stress. I am Courtney Kohler. I'm a senior associate with the National Community Action Partnership. I work on the training and technical assistance team. And we are happy to present this material to you today. We have the Prosperity Agenda, who's going to be presenting the content, talking about some of their tools and resources and their research that they have done. But as we get started, I want to just go ahead and ground us in the promise of community action. So feel free to say it with me at your desk or wherever you are. Community action changes people's lives, embodies the spirit of hope, improves communities, and makes America a better place to live. We care about the entire community, and we are dedicated to helping people help themselves and each other. So this presentation today is brought to you by our Learning Communities Resource Center. So part of the purpose of this work that we do at the partnership is to analyze community action outcomes, identify effective, promising, and innovative practice models that alleviate the causes and conditions of poverty. So really, it's all about building the capacity, innovating to be able to fight poverty. And this is actually the third year of a 3-year grant cycle for the Learning Communities Resource Center. So we've had a few iterations of this project and hopefully looking forward to continuing the work into the next year as well. So with that, I want to go ahead and hand it over to Rachel Brooks and Sylvia Raskin. They're both from the Prosperity Agenda, which is based out of Seattle, Washington. We've done a lot of work with them in the past around family-centered coaching and having them present some of that information to our network. So they're going to be talking a little bit different but related topic today on financial well-being. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Sylvia, and she's going to dive into the content. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sylvia Raskin from the Prosperity Agenda. I'm an innovation manager, and I've done a lot of the research and prototyping for our project on money mindset and how you can take action on financial well-being in times of stress. And we'll kind of go through what the stress looks like for people in precedented times and what stress looks like in the age of the coronavirus and the kind of economic downturn and the lasting effects of that. I also have my colleague Rachel Brooks with me, managing partner of the Prosperity Agenda, and she'll take the second half of the presentation. Please feel free to put any questions in the question and answer box. We'll have kind of a moment in the middle to have a bit of a discussion and see your reactions to some of this material. So I want to introduce you to the Prosperity Agenda and our mission. We design pathways to economic and racial justice rooted in the wisdom, experience, and expertise of families who are enduring economic inequality. So everything we do is based on firsthand qualitative research with families. And we work with those families and staff like yourself to imagine, test, and realize programs where people thrive. And together, we hope to illuminate the relationships, mindsets, and practices that can shift whole systems. So we really appreciate the work with community action partnerships because we know how important relationships are to your work and that interpersonal dynamics that can really make a big difference, as well as our mindsets, our worldview, how we see participants, how we see our work, how we see the systems and the ecosystems that we work in, and the way that we work, and how we might imagine that to be more impactful for our participants. We often work with employers to do meaningful work for employees, making sure that employers are taking that responsibility as an important stakeholder to shift how employees are treated, to make sure that they are protected and safe and paid living wages. We work with human service providers, especially on a project called Family-Centered Coaching, so to design family-centered human services, to really put the needs and desires of families at the center of our work. And lastly, we often work with financial service providers to do equitable financial services, and that will be a focus of our presentation today. And financial service providers, I'll also say, is kind of everybody. That's a bit of what we'll talk about. Traditionally we think about banks and credit unions, but anyone providing financial education or anyone providing, someone who has a food bank or someone who's doing weatherization or, coaching, anything like that, any of the human services resources are really directly connected back to kind of a financial need as well. So the first thing we want to look at is the financial stress that people are under. Money is constantly on the minds of people experiencing poverty. This is from our own research from 2019, our direct qualitative research with families. And so this was a statistic that really stuck with us, that 53% of people say that money consumes their thinking on a daily basis. And most people are not on autopilot. Just a very small minority of people feel like they're on autopilot, feel like they have a plan, feel like it's under control. And people also discuss money with their children to say that financial issues really have an effect on the whole family. Young people are learning from their families about how to manage money and what different beliefs and values about money are. And this was before COVID. Obviously, this research was done in 2019, where 53% of people were thinking about money on a daily basis. And for folks who were, particularly receiving TANF benefits, and with the COVID crisis, 7 out of 10 people now are concerned about their finances during COVID. This has really expanded to people of all different income groups with kind of unprecedented job loss, unprecedented economic downturn, and really a continually moving goalpost in terms of when people might be back to work or back to, what the economy is going to look like after COVID is probably going to be very different. So a lot of people saying they're extremely concerned about their finances, very concerned and somewhat concerned. So what are people concerned about specifically? What are they stressed about? Savings, having enough emergency savings, job security, and wages are the top financial stressors, as well as income fluctuations, people who are gig workers, people, if someone was driving Lyft, that their income is going to be drastically changed before and after, and for so many different jobs that were affected by COVID. Paying utilities, paying down debt, major issues, and we can see why people are saying their finances are consuming their daily thinking when there are so many aspects of someone's financial life that they are juggling. So what can you do to take action? What can you do to help people right now? So I would say the two main things that people need right now that are kind of the umbrella of, or the access point to a lot of the other work is, one, recognizing and reducing money shame so people can talk and ask for help. We're going to kind of discuss this in a moment, but if people feel like they can't talk about their issues, that they're having trouble paying their utilities, that they're worried about having enough emergency saving, that they're worried about their income fluctuations, then we can't provide them the resources or we can't provide them with that help. And money shame is one of those things that is cultural, is generational, is kind of embedded into American culture and values, is that people don't talk about money. And people feel like they're a failure if they're having money troubles, even if it is not, even if it is something so systemic, even if it is something so international that we are going through like COVID. So we really need to address, we need to get beyond this issue, or at least bring it down to a level where people can say, I am struggling with this, so that we can connect them with the resources and help that they need. And second, connecting people, so that brings up the second point, which is that connecting people to the information and referrals that are most relevant to them. Financial education, as we saw on that other slide, what are people's top concerns when it comes to money? There's so many issues that someone might be having. There's so many aspects of your financial life. But what is most pressing and most important to each person is going to be different. So it's really important that they get the support they need so it doesn't feel overwhelming. If someone is working on paying their utility bill, they don't necessarily need a resource around improving their credit score. It's just the timing is really, really important for the different referrals. And in terms of addressing people's financial stress, we want to address what is the top concern and top priority for each person. And making use, there are wonderful resources and referrals that are out there, making use of those referrals, getting to know the ones that are in your local community that you trust and that you would feel strongly about making a warm referral to. So you can get started by talking, by doing what you do really well as community action providers. And, talking with people, asking questions, and extending that empathy and listening to the folks that come in the door. Finances, it might seem different, but to say that it is very similar to a lot of the work that you do. And you don't have to be an expert. I think that's what people worry about. That's what we heard when we talked to practitioners, in this field. They said, I'm worried about I don't know enough about financial information. Like, it's very detailed, it's complicated in some aspects, and there's so much of it to learn. But we want to remind you that you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to know the ins and outs of, mortgages and, tenant rights and, loans and managing debt. You don't have to be the expert on that. All you need to do is listen to people's financial needs so that you can refer them and connect them with the resources to people who do have that deep expertise in each of those areas. And the second part is really addressing people's financial shame with non-judgmental conversations and questions. So easy ways to kind of get that conversation going. We've worked with many community action partners in the past, and people have said, for example, we were talking about an intake form, and there was an intake form that says, "Are you homeless?" And if we just ask, "Are you homeless?" some people are just going to say no, because that question is a bit too confronting, or they're defining homelessness in a different way than we might define homelessness. They're sleeping in a car, and so they're like, "Well, I'm not homeless," or they're sleeping on a friend's couch. And so the definitions are different. But when people ask more nuanced questions and say, where did you sleep last night? Where do you stay on a night? That's probably not the perfect question. But if you ease into those kind of questions, a lot more information gets shared, and so that you can hear more of what is on people's minds. So we can build on success by recognizing how families manage money. This is a bit of kind of expanding our conception of what managing money means too. So income and wealth, this is kind of getting back to the mindsets and the worldview of kind of American culture. And so income and wealth are not the evidence of good decisions. It doesn't mean that someone is super smart and talented because they have income and wealth. We know that they may have. The number one way that people have wealth in the United States is money that they have inherited and money that's been passed on through multi-generations. And therefore, on the flip side of that, poverty is not evidence of bad decisions. And we want to, anytime we hear, it's just so deeply rooted that it's kind of baked into a lot of the solutions that are offered around this and a lot of the way people talk. So kind of listening for those things, and where might people be, where might folks be feeling like it is their responsibility or their fault that they are in a particular circumstance, or saying that, someone made bad decisions and therefore they need to change the way they act. From our research and from, a lot of literature that's out there on the topic, families experiencing poverty know how to manage money. People that don't have a lot of money are actually great at making a budget, are great at making intentional spending decisions. And so let's look at some of that data. This is from our savings initiative research. Families have savings goals. 47% are saving to cover a surprise expense or emergency. Unfortunately, through COVID, a lot of that emergency savings has already been spent. Or people are saving for a specific purchase, which is awesome. And about a third of people are not currently saving money. So savings goals are, most people have goals. We have another project around this, but the question of how do you actually take steps and how do you actually practice ways to reach your goals is kind of the challenging part, not just the setting of the goals. And so families also have savings practices that work, and these savings practices go beyond just financial savings. That's typically what people think of. They think about money in the bank, they think about money in a coffee can. But what we heard from families directly is that people purchase extra items. So one mother told us that she purchases extra diapers when she has additional funds, and because she feels like if she has extra diapers, then it's going to be okay. People collect change, put extra money on their bills. They hide cash. Saving gift cards is another unique strategy that we heard. Saving up gift cards for a particular time, like a holiday or a birthday. And we also heard, that's not reflected in this chart, ways that people are saving through relationships and social capital. So, for example, giving someone a ride or asking a neighbor to fix their car are ways that people, or watching someone's children. So in one example, someone went over to their friend's house to do laundry, and while that person, and she washed both of their children, and that saved her $10 to $15 at the laundromat and time, and they were able to exchange those different resources. So wanted to have a bit of kind of a popcorn discussion. We know that every family has strengths and stresses. So why is talking about money often so hard? So I wonder if you can put this into the chat. If you think, if you have ideas about why is talking about money specifically hard, or you can raise your hand and we can unmute you if you want to share something out loud.
All right, we do have some thoughts coming in the chat. A few were sent to the host directly, so I wanted to go ahead and share those. One person said that it's connected to our identity. Someone else mentioned that shame comes in, and you might not want family to know that you're having trouble. Another one mentioned, for many, a lack of income means a lack of also being able to provide for their families and for what they need. Social status. Also that no one wants to feel that they're failing their family. Might also be the perception that if you aren't good with money, then you're not a good person. Talking about money is hard because many people attribute having money with responsibility, self-sufficiency, and decision-making.
Absolutely. Thank you everyone who chatted those reasons, and Courtney for reading them out. Absolutely. I think what folks are highlighting really are these mindsets, these worldviews about money. Money means something about me. So my lack of money also means something about me, and means something pretty personal and pretty painful for people. And so I just want to kind of remind people at the beginning of the presentation that if we can address some of these things and say, I know that it's hard. I know that we're thinking that it means something about you, but I want to be able, first of all, I want to say that that's not the case. I want to say that you are good with money. Everyone is good with money. Everyone has experiences with money. And whether we consider those good experiences or bad experiences, we can still learn from them. And that, research has shown that having at least one person you can talk to about this, like that's the antidote to shame. Shame is feeling like you'll never be able to connect with someone because of how bad like guilt is something you've done wrong, and then shame is like you are wrong, like folks are saying, the identity piece. So feeling like you can actually talk to someone and saying, hey, I've had that situation before. I know a bunch of people who have had that situation before. I mean, half of the United States is dealing with that problem right now. That kind of connection is really how we begin to escape shame. So thank you so much for those suggestions. And then I also want to reflect back to the folks on this call that as community action professionals and practitioners, you know how to do this. You do this on an everyday basis. And so to say that, I know money sounds like it is this whole other world and it is complex and difficult to think about, but you already have the capabilities of being able to listen with empathy and be able to dissolve their shame. So remember, you don't have to be the expert on money to be able to have some of these conversations. So I want to turn it over to Rachel to give you some more tools about how we've, a tool that we've worked on that can help practitioners in that. Let me pass this ball.
Thank you, Sylvia, and thank you, everybody, for participating. We're so grateful to have you join us today and to already have shared some of your experience. What we want to move into now is a solution that we developed, which is just one way to be able to shift this conversation so that you can build off the skills that you have, the really important skills of empathy and listening and questioning, curiosity and inquiry and support and non-judgment that you bring to these conversations to really unlock action and creativity around money conversations so that people are not limited by the shame that we all hold as part of this culture around money in our country. And this centering on identity and inspiration, what inspires us to move towards what our goals are, is what we design Money Mindset cards to be able to do. We designed these as part of a partnership with practitioners who didn't have a primary focus on money in their program. It was a workforce development program, a variety of different workforce development programs, but we've since brought these cards into a lot of different environments where money is not the primary focus of the relationship or the conversation, to allow people to have that conversation. So whether the focus is on family and parenting or workforce development, people recovering from and moving forward after domestic violence, a lot of different environments where we've seen people be able to bring these really critical conversations to help people build wealth and income, which we know can be really challenging to be able to move from into in progress in those areas. So we built these cards to make it really comfortable and relevant to be able to build relationships around conversations with money that are non-judgmental so that we can reduce shame and anxiety and build off those strengths that people have and be really responsive to real needs so that in these conversations, people's really unique needs can emerge. And those are the areas where you can be responsive and really relevant to what people have identified are real barriers to them, because so many of these conversations where people have real expertise as financial counselors and financial coaches can focus on so many technical areas that it's hard for anyone in an organization to really hold all that knowledge. And what these conversations allow people to do is center on what people's unique needs really are. There's a question about where to obtain Money Mindset cards. I'm going to share a link to the main page for this, but I'm also going to be able to share where we have some that you can download and use right away. And we'll take a little bit of our time here too to explore one of the cards. Recently, we did some research to renew what we already knew about money mindset cards. In this process where we use qualitative research with participants and staff to really understand what the need was, we designed this prototype of a few cards and then worked with organizations to build that out into a set of 30 cards. And what we heard direct back from people is that it really increased their feeling of financial control of their life. It increased their feeling of social connections because this was built on relationships and conversations. And it increased their use of financial services because as they built confidence and clarity about what their financial needs were, they could work with staff to be able to find out where they could get those needs met. Or they could walk into a financial institution themselves feeling confident that they deserve to come in and ask questions about the kinds of services that organizations offer and whether those meet their needs. But for organizations, we also found out that it built stronger partnerships with them with financial institutions because they felt more comfortable having conversations about money and they felt better be able to represent the needs of the people that they were working with, of the communities that they were in. And they could talk about how a financial institution could really meet those needs and come into an organization. It's often been a common practice for representatives from financial organizations to come into community-based services and present on services. And sometimes that can be really alienating because what's being presented is often services and products that might not be a great fit for people who have really low incomes. And so this has been able to bridge that experience so that even if it's somebody from a financial institution who's going to come in and present and talk to people about what they can do, they can use these cards to, at the very least, have an icebreaker, but maybe even actually really connect one-on-one about the experience of talking about money and pursuing our goals, which is common among everyone. And for them and for the community-based organizations and government organizations, we saw a real reduction in bias about assumptions about financial behavior. So just like Sylvia was talking about before, there is a really common theme among financial education that it is about people's choices. And it's about people's bad choices because they're experiencing really low incomes, they're experiencing poverty, and that those results that is a result of people's choices. And so this is about shifting that conversation to be able to understand what strengths people are already bringing and really reinforcing that people bring so much to the table that they do really well and that it varies for everyone. And so that conversation can really emerge different connections that people have from their families, from their experience, from their work lives, and connect people around those things so that there's greater empathy for those different financial experiences and that there's a lot of similarities as well. So this was before COVID. This is what we knew was working really well already when people were using money mindset cards to have these conversations. After COVID, we also looked at different ways that people could use these by phone and video. And I'll be sharing a link that will take you to a few cards that we just made publicly available to download and that we selected particularly to be able to use by phone and video, and especially under really high stress around people's finances. We worked with a number of organizations and we heard that even over, a virtual connection, that people let their guard down and that they took that time to explore attitudes towards money and that it gave people an opportunity to breathe. I want to pause there and have us all breathe, take an opportunity to breathe, because I think that this is exactly what happens during times of incredible stress, whether it's parenting or money or work, is that we don't get that moment to breathe and reflect and really explore what's happening in that moment and find the right choices for ourselves. People also shared that the conversation among participants started more easily and the conversation grew more organically. So I think, at the early days of COVID, as we talked to practitioners, there were a lot of people just calling to check up on people. How are you doing? What do you need? How can we help you? And they often weren't finding how they could really connect with people. And so this was a way to have an activity or a set of questions that you could come into a conversation to really find out about people's financial lives in the midst of a national, global economic downturn. A really simple way to begin that conversation, and that's so much of what Money Mindset cards are about, is starting a conversation, starting a different conversation about money that locks into a different set of skills that don't always get acknowledged in staff and in the participants that you all are working with. So again, before COVID, this was something that we had built to be able to use in a lot of different environments. And it's a simple box of cards that you could pull, almost anyone from the deck, and have an icebreaker, have one-on-one coaching, group coaching, which really built off a lot of peer experience that people could connect with each other, to be able to bring in participants and recruit through these conversations, have housing meetings. And we also saw, as a surprise, a really welcome surprise, that people used it inside their own organizations, that it was a way for people among staff to have a conversation about money, and bring in other people, other organizations, to be able to talk about how you connect around money. And that, again, it surfaced so many interesting insights about what people's experiences were and where there were tremendous opportunities to be able to act on some of those financial stressors or opportunities. That was before COVID. During COVID, we tried to act really immediately to make some things available so that people could practice this online. These are cards that we sell in a box set, that we continue to sell in a box set, and for our partners who already had those, we wanted to provide a way that they could have those conversations by phone, by video, by Google Classroom, by Zoom, by Canvas, whatever people are using to be able to bring that in. But for some people who didn't already have the cards, we also wanted to make sure that there were a few available that they could download. So you can go to that link that I shared in the chat, and if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see a link to facilitating this virtually. This is the same link that will take you there, moneymindsetcards.org. What we selected were 3 of the cards that we offer in print and in box set. We had really designed this work to center on connection, and so we had built them to have it be a way to sit with somebody and take out a card that had, just really clear instructions that somebody in a peer group, somebody with, really emerging facilitation skills, or someone who was very skilled, or someone who really had not had a conversation about money before, would really just follow along and have that conversation. So we took 3 of these that we felt like were especially relevant to this time and published those on our website. One of them is something that we've used in a lot of different programmatic work. It's called Find Your Why in the Sky. And this is really about sitting down and thinking about what is the center of your goals and your intention. And I don't think it'll be a surprise that for a lot of people, this is family. This is their children. This is the other people in their life who rely on them and who are relied upon. And that centering on that and what's truly important to you can help really clear out a lot of the clutter of the stress and anxiety that we feel, so that we can stay focused on that and really center our feelings and our inspiration on them. The next one is about a financial growth mindset. I think, bad at math could be, I think, a whole series of books of how people feel about working with numbers and finances, and that there's this predominant idea that this is something that isn't accessible to most people, and that takes, extensive training to be able to understand your budgeting and math. And this is about just recognizing that and how that appears in your thinking, and opening yourself up to the fact that we're all continuing to grow when it comes to understanding our financial lives. And that this is especially important because our financial lives change. And I think this is something we can obviously see now, that it changes when we move out of our home. It changes when we live with other people, when we have partners and children. It changes when we go to school. It changes when we have health crises. It changes as we age. So we have to change along with it. We have to get to know ourselves and our financial lives all over again each time, and find out what's right for us in that moment. So a financial growth mindset is really key to that, in being able to adapt to new challenges and new opportunities that present themselves. Part of this work was that we identified that people felt a great deal of stress going from a really low income to having some income. and that this was also about adapting to that stress, and that when you get some increased income all at once or as part of your work, that's a new set of challenges to be able to adapt to. And then Build Financial Control is another card that we published that's about thinking about what is in your control and what is out of your control. And this is a great exercise around money. It's a great exercise about a lot of things in our lives and being able to center around what we can actually have control in. And I think this is really important exercise to do with participants, because that's where you as a participant have a real opportunity for change. It's finding out what really feels like it is in control, and then working to be able to make change within what is probably a really slim margin when you have a very low income and you're experiencing poverty. And then understanding what's out of control and how you can support what is outside of someone's control. And this is where we're actually going to take some time to experience this. So you can go and look at that page and download these and use them. I really encourage you to get started in a really simple way. Have these conversations with the people who are in your home, who you've been spending a lot of time with for these last several months, maybe a different conversation. But you can also have these conversations with the people that you work with, people in other community groups that you're connected to now. And it's kind of a fresh way that you can have a connection, but you can experience it for yourself and see what it's like to facilitate and have a conversation around this before you bring it to participants and see what that experience is like. But now we're going to ask you to actually take out a piece of paper if you have one, or you can take a spreadsheet or a Google Doc, whatever you have available to you. This is a really simple exercise to be able to think about and reflect for yourself and the stress that you may be experiencing during COVID or generally about your own financial lives. And simply draw a line down the middle of the page and take a moment to think about all the ways that you feel like you're in control of the money in your life. And this might be just that you have a plan. It might be that you have accounts where you know the money is. It might be that you know what your expenses are. It might be that you know that things are going to get harder. It might be a lot of different things that you feel like you actually have some control over and that you can place on that side of, oh, I'm sorry, I went out of order. I started on the positive side. Stay with me now. Stay on the things that you feel comfortable with, that you feel like you're in control of. And on the other side, think about the things that you feel out of control. And I wonder if people can share a little bit about those things. What's something that you feel like, just in the chat, or you can raise your hand, that you feel like is in your control in your financial lives right now?
All right, we have some coming in. Have some people said expenses, regular income, savings, emergency fund.
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly how much money is coming in, the amount of money I spend on needs versus wants. Lifestyle, I make the money having a savings.
Mm-hmm.
Known expenses, that I can adjust my plans to make sure I stay in the budget.
Thank you. And then on the other side, we can take a moment here to let those feelings out a little bit. What feels like it is out of your control? I can think of one thing, but I'll let somebody else say it. What feels like in your financial lives right now is just completely out of your control?
Yeah, someone said economy, unexpected expenses, emergency vet bill, security, cost of health care, taxes, COVID, job security, health, knowing that job is ending in a little over a year, so it's unknown, more medical expenses, medical costs.
So I think something that we can acknowledge at least here is that all of you working so hard to try and help other people reduce the stress in their lives, you're feeling a lot of stress too. And that it's important that you have a way to manage this financial stress as you try and help other people reduce that feeling of anxiety. And I feel like people have centered on things that at different scales are really common among a lot of different people. So thank you for sharing that piece of it, especially in this conversation. I think, these cards are really meant to not create easy answers because there aren't easy problems around financial lives typically. But what it does allow is for people to reflect and take that moment to just start thinking about where there is opportunity, what is some small step that you can take that changes your financial life, changes your financial well-being, in various ways. It could be that it's about reducing your shame and anxiety, which is something that's available to people regardless of what income they have. And that's a service that you can offer to people regardless of what income they have and how our economy changes over time. But there might also be some small opportunity in really recognizing what is in people's control or what's not in people's control and they can get help around that can open up. And what can it look like in a week or a month? And how can you settle your thinking around that timeline, a timeline that works for you in your creativity, in your understanding, in your identity, in your culture. And then these are questions that we offer. All of these have a few coaching questions that people can use about what would give you more control, what resources would help you. And I think this is the bridge to the second part of what Sylvia shared about what you can do right now, is you can hear from people once they've had a chance to reflect and take a moment to really think about what their financial life status is and what their concerns about that. There might be something really particular, like healthcare, for instance, or their credit score or emergency savings. And now you can know what your participation is. You can know what resources that you can find out. And over time, you might find out, and I'm sure you are, that participants are often coming back to 2 or 3 of the same things. And so you don't have to be in a position of bringing every possible financial resource to people, but maybe 2 or 3 things that really come up in these conversations again and again. So this is one example of how to use money mindset cards in a really simple way. I really encourage you to go to that website, use these cards, and be able to practice them with people in your lives and with participants as a way to just change this conversation and have a conversation that helps people feel like they are more in control and that their identities and cultures are being honored and that you tap into their inspiration and their own intention about their financial lives. We're going to shift into one other aspect of this research that we recently did, talking with participants. We talked with a number of different organizations to be able to understand how they would use this work by phone and by video. But we learned quite a bit more through that process. This was just in April and May 20, and I'm going to pass it back to Sylvia to talk about this because she conducted this research and had all these conversations because we learned something really important about another part of this work, which is the mindset of the practitioner and how that shifts the experience for participants you're working with. So thank you. And there you go, Sylvia.
Thanks. Yeah, what we did was offer, we did some training sessions with 9 different organizations around the country. And what we just spoke on is really the what of financial education. What kind of questions can you ask? What is the material that goes into that? And I think a lot of what the innovation is in these money mindset cards is really how you're doing it. So I hope that's coming across as well. And that's a lot of what we found out through this research during COVID is really asking, the process of asking questions to find out what people's needs are, rather than saying, okay, I know you're in a lot of financial stress, so we're going to put together 8 sessions on financial wellness. Each one is going to have a particular topic, and we're going to give you just like a big, rundown on all of that information. We realized, through these classes that that's going to be overwhelming for people, especially during COVID. So if we can step back and say, okay, the plan here is to have a conversation, like one of our participants said, that like allows people to breathe, that is an easy conversation about finances, one that is not full of technical information right up front, one that is not focused on what not to do. You know, I went to a presentation from a credit union around COVID, managing your finances in COVID, and it was like, okay, well, what subscriptions do you have? What subscriptions can you cancel? And that's really about what not to do rather than, and how to have more austerity in this time rather than a strengths-based approach that is saying, where are you proud of yourself for managing money well? What have you done in the past that's been really successful when times have been tight? And how can we build off of those strengths? Or what resources are you most interested in right now? And I can put you in contact with someone who has deep knowledge on this. So I think that, you know, not having to approach this from a classroom vibe, but really, you know, approaching this in more of a coaching conversation, community sort of focus, which I know the folks on this call are great at. And then I want to talk about, so I kind of mixed most of these slides together, but working on an equitable money mindset really has to do, you know, Rachel talked a lot about not focusing in on people's behaviors. I mean, people's behavior still has an effect, but an equitable money mindset means looking at the choices that people have or how people's choices are affected within a system. So knowing that there is unprecedented job loss, that some industries are not going to be coming back in the same way they were before, understanding that, you know, there are not widespread protections for people around eviction and foreclosure. Like, those are determining people's decisions right now and are what is on people's minds. So just kind of taking that systems-wide perspective and connecting with folks, because, you know, the role of working with people on an interpersonal basis, like you do in community action programs, and, you know, the community aspect of your community work side of your programs too, what can be addressed at a local or city or state level that can really affect people's finances is really, really important. So we don't put the burden of this global financial crisis on the shoulders of an individual family. Yeah, is there more you want to say about that, Rachel?
I'll just share that we tried to go into a little more detail on this on a recent blog that we published, so I put that link in the chat to try and look at, you know, in a little bit more of a visual form, what this shift looks like from viewing people in terms of their personal responsibility and their individual choices, and shifting that conversation with individuals or groups to an understanding of systemic impacts. And there's a few things that we've listed about, you know, some of the things that Sylvia just shared about some of the impact that comes down on people. And I think, you know, that's scary, because I think to be able to really acknowledge how little control there is in an individual life to be able to make these shifts, but also in your own hands, in the hands of programs and organizations to make systemic shifts. But the more we're able to take on that expertise of the system and not people's individual lives, the greater impact we can all have to make really systemic change.
Oh, okay. So, you know, I think where we want to land this is that individuals, you know, we see the effects of systemic issues on individual people's lives. People are suffering. That is the unfortunate reality of before COVID, and definitely exacerbated by COVID, that people, you know, have debt, repossession, eviction, foreclosure, more medium-term impacts, like those things all impact someone's credit score, how much interest they have to pay to borrow, or their ability to borrow in general. And so it's really important that we, you know, we care for people if they say, I'm worried about eviction and I need help preventing that, and they need, an advocate or guidance on how to talk to their landlord or how to get an eviction waiver. I know in Washington, in Seattle, King County, where I live, there's an eviction moratorium, right? But does everyone feel like everyone might not feel the same comfort in standing up to their, their landlord? It doesn't mean that everyone's following that guidance, right? Or everyone knows about that countywide protection that is available to folks. So, but that's not something that I need to take on myself if I am not steeped in that. There are tenants' rights organizations who are, know the ins and outs of those laws, who I would say, I would love to connect you with this person who is an expert in tenants' rights. And so, it's really important that we care for people who are suffering from these systemic issues. But addressing these individual issues doesn't fix the system that has caused them. And so we want to, this is kind of an open question around what is the role of community action in changing the systems that create financial stress? I would love to hear, how you are all addressing this, because this is such a kind of big question, right? How can we both care for individuals who are suffering and try to go upstream to affect the systems that are creating this financial stress in the first place? And then we'd love, I'd love for folks to either raise their hand or put that in the chat. And I think in the chat, I'm having difficulty seeing people's responses. So I think just making sure you mark everyone so we can see your responses. But yeah, what are your different organizations doing that are changing systems? And Courtney, if you see someone, there's no option to mark everyone in the chat. Interesting.
Yeah, I heard that on the attendee end, they've made some changes with WebEx, and I feel like that was maybe one of the changes.
Yeah.
But I did see you can send it to host and presenter or all panelists. That might work. But there was one that came into just me that said, I believe that we need to perform advocacy efforts on a local, state, and federal level.
Awesome. Yeah, and I know I've been a part of some of these advocacy efforts in the past, and having people's personal stories be a part of those advocacy efforts have been when it has been most impactful. And so, the work that you're doing, with individuals on a daily basis can add so much to that advocacy effort. Awesome. Desiree saying voting for state officials. And equipping people in financial situations to advocate as well. Yeah, absolutely. In my previous work, I took a bunch of teenagers to our state legislator, and we had folks talking, but then when the teenagers started talking, it was like, oh, that's when the representatives actually started listening.
There's a couple more that I see that said our agency is doing a universal application to shift the system and to cover as many bases as possible with each family. And another one that said, I also believe we need to examine our policies and practices to determine whether we have implicit bias and other systemic problems ingrained within.
Thank you.
And we can see what you're doing here in this national call, sharing practices with each other, sharing what's worked in your agency with other agencies across the country is huge.
I think we really benefit from having a lot of conversations with individual community action agencies around the country and with state associations and with the National Association itself. And it often strikes us that community action itself is probably one of the greatest national resources for data on the experience of poverty in our country. And I wish that my hope is that it becomes a really standard practice for policymakers to really turn to community action as the source of community knowledge, community experience, and that these individual conversations that you're having are an incredible source of experience and data that people can use to really understand what change needs to happen on the whole. And so every single one of these conversations really allows each one of you to be a really uniquely equipped advocate for that experience and for your experience in the system as well.
Michelle is saying,
if there's no other comments, I will say please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. My email address is at the end of these slides, which I'm sure are going to be made available and in the recording. I will also add it here. So please don't don't hesitate to get in touch to continue that conversation. Those questions are really important to us, and your experience and the experience of the communities that you work in are the source of all of our work. So please don't hesitate to get in touch to keep having that conversation and to ask any other questions about money mindset cards or anything else that the solutions that we've designed that we can offer.
All right. Well, thank you, Rachel and Sylvia. We will go ahead and open up for any questions that anyone has. Let us know. What I might do is go through some of the concluding slides that we have, and then check back onto the chat to see if there's any additional questions that have come in. So I'll circle back to that, but we did want to share a couple additional resources and webinars that we're going to be doing that kind of link into this similar topic. We do have one that's not quite as related, but still a good one. Next Wednesday, as part of our Webinar Wednesday series, we're going to be talking about leveraging crisis as a springboard for action and innovation. So actually, I guess it does relate some, and it'll probably tie into some of that COVID-19 response and innovation. We're going to have Garrett County Community Action Commission out of Maryland talking with us about some of the things that they've done. And then we're going to have another webinar on October 21st that's going to be tied into kind of the financial empowerment topic, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is going to be joining us for that one. And we just recently did a webinar that we had. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau talks with us about economic impact payments. So if you have people that are struggling with that, with receiving them and figuring out that whole process, we do have a recording and some resources on that. And then there's the associated toolkits that they have on your money, your goals, and money management topics as well. We do have our Community Action Academy. Just want to remind everyone that this is our online learning management system. We have on-demand e-courses, resources, spaces for peer engagement and virtual networking. And we're always interested in hearing what you might need more of on this site. We're going to be looking to add some more courses in the coming year. So interested to hear if there's, if you're searching through the site and you're thinking it would really be great to add some additional courses on certain topics. We're always interested in hearing about that. So we do have some family-centered coaching e-courses. Rachel typed that in the chat. We have an introduction to family-centered coaching course that is currently on there, and we're actually working on being able to share some additional information as well. So. And it is available on your mobile app too, so you can download the Moodle mobile app and then connect it to the Community Action Partnership site. So you can literally learn with anywhere on the go. So so that's available. And then just want everyone to save the date for our virtual management and leadership training conference that we're going to be having in February this next year, February 3rd through the 5th of 2021. We did go ahead and make the decision to go ahead and host that conference virtually, and we're already planning out some of the great sessions that we hope to provide. So with that, I'll pause and see if there's any additional questions. And Rachel entered the Family-Centered Coaching Toolkit. It's available online as well that the Prosperity Agenda has available, and it's free to download. And you guys have redone a lot of your resources, so they're kind of split up in different chunks. And so whenever I realized that, I thought that was a really great feature. So I encourage you all to go check that out. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions at this time. Anything else, Sylvia or Rachel, that you want to say as we close?
Someone told me today to have a happy, healthy, hopeful day. So I wish that for all of you too.
That's great. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. Appreciate you sharing this content. See lots of thank yous coming in the chat here. And as Rachel said, feel free to reach out to them at any time with anything related to the specific content. But then we also have our Learning Communities Resource Center that's available as well. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. And hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye.